It's a Blood Red podcast courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along. It's Darwin Day as Benfica agreed to a possible €100 million deal to take Darwin Nunez to Anfield. A potentially club record signing in the offing with just a medical to go. What could possibly go wrong? To analyse, debate, and discuss the Darwin deal here on the latest Blood Red podcast, we have the epitome of excitement, the chief Ian Doyle, and enthused David Lynch, and the Echo's own wonder kid, Tom Cavilla. Chaps, I trust you're all well. Doyle, I'll throw immediately over to you. And as I say, they're right at the top, only really waiting for the medical to go. But we know from Liverpool history, they're not always plain sailing.
Don't forget the work permit. So there's that as well. So although there shouldn't be any issues with that, let's be honest, he's a full Uruguayan international. So no scaremongering there, but I suspect that might take it. It depends on when they did it. So it'll be interesting to see, the big confirmation, full confirmation of should the transfer go through, will be when they get that. But that's normally a formality with things like this. Medical to come. Liverpool have done quite well to. Although of course it's a strange one, isn't it? Basically, both sides will be claiming victory in those negotiations because Benfica wanted €100 million, and there's every chance if things go well, they'll get €100 million. But Liverpool didn't want to spend, what was it, €85 million up front. What was that compute as? I can't remember. Was it 75 million?
I think it was 75, yeah.
Yeah, £75 million. So they've got it down to 64, is it? Yeah, that's about right, yeah. So, from that point of view, yeah, Liverpool haven't set a new transfer record yet because obviously Van Dijk was 75 million. But let's be honest, if he ends up being Nunez, ends up being half as good as what Liverpool will hope, he'll break that barrier. So I think it's fair to say that he's probably going to be the transfer signing. So as I say, Benfica will say, well, we're ultimately going to get our money. Liverpool go, well, we didn't. We were able to manage our finances in such a way that we didn't have to spend such a large amount straight up. And as we know, Sadio Mane is probably going to be going to Bayern Munich. Depends. There's no movement there. I don't want to do what I did on Friday and just go through the entire podcast with my first answer, so I shall resist doing that. The Liverpool, it looks as though it's not far off being done. As you said, Benfica announced it. Weirdly, it was about 12:57 at night, their time. Yeah. So it's just before midnight, which I'm sure the Portuguese newspapers were absolutely made up with that. Like, oh, thanks a lot. Our deadline's just gone and you've just gone and put that out. So cheers. So, don't know, strange one. I'm not quite sure why they did it at that time. There's bound to be a reason somewhere along the line. But ultimately, what the Echo had been saying from the start is exactly what's happened. They finally got that deal, the agreement done. Now they just have to get through the medical, which, of course, as you kind of pointed to, Guy, there's never any issues with medicals. And Liverpool are making summer signings for large amounts of money under your Klopp.
No, most certainly. Lynchy, in terms of the deal, obviously it's really accelerated from the middle of last week, and we know Liverpool just how quickly they like to strike these deals. How much do you think there is the need and the desire for Liverpool specifically to go and get themselves a top number 9 to lead that attack for, I suppose, many years to come? He's expected to sign a 6-year contract.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because he sort of, we become so used to sort of having Firmino in that position in the early stages of Jurgen Klopp's reign and having that sort of false number 9, and then obviously sort of transitioning to this season where they've had Sadio Mane in that position and now he's the one who's looking to move on. So you think you can have someone who's more of a traditional centre forward. It's an interesting sort of evolution of that front line, and I think it's a good move because they had so much strength on that left-hand side where Mane, would have said that was his initial position, probably his best position when he signed for the club. But when you've got Jota who can play there and you've got Luis Diaz, you don't really need to get a like-for-like replacement for Mane. They just go for something that give them a little bit of a different option. Although I do, having watched a little bit of him, he does actually like to drift to that left-hand side a little bit from the centre-forward position. But I think, Liverpool want that fluidity there and options, and someone as well who, against sort of deep defences, who's got that physical presence, who you can sort of hit with crosses. I know they've got some good headers of the ball in the squad already, and Jota's particularly good, even though he's not particularly physically imposing. But I think, deep defences who really, really sort of close the spaces, it's hard to get those headed goals against, and it's hard to break them down. And I think Darwin as well, as well as everything else he brings that physicality and traditional centre forward qualities really. And I think, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he fits in. He's still a young player with a lot to develop. So, there's still a lot to learn about him, I suppose, and what he's like as a player. And it will maybe take him a little bit of time to get going, but it's, on the surface, a really, really promising young centre forward with a big career ahead of him by the sounds of things.
Yeah, the system, Tom, was tweaked towards the back end of last season with Sadio Mane playing as a number 9. Now, it feels a discredit to say, but almost it's an upgrade on that Mane isn't an archetypal number 9, hasn't come through his whole career playing that role. Yet Darwin very much, he is an out-and-out box player.
Yeah, although, like you said, Mane was doing very well in that role for Liverpool sort of at the end of last season. So, it was working well for Liverpool. But like you said, this will give Liverpool, more of a focal point in attack going forwards. You'd expect that's what's going to happen now for Liverpool. It will be Nunez leading the line for Liverpool. So I'm just interested to see what Klopp goes with kind of on the other side of Nunez on the left and the right, who he will pick for each match. You'd expect, it probably will be Diaz and Salah to begin with at the start of the season. But, like you said, there's still Jota and Firmino you've got to sort of mix in as well. So, yeah, Liverpool, like you said, I think a lot of people have made the point of kind of comparing him to Torres or Suarez, because Liverpool really haven't had that kind of out-and-out striker for quite a while. Obviously, Firmino, people tend to class him under the false 9 category a bit more. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does. And, it looks like an exciting signing for Liverpool.
I know you're not going to want to get too excited, Doyley, about speaking like it.
About
like
anything.
About anything, yeah. Anything, yeah.
Until that medical comes back.
I'm quite excited. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm quite excited by the fact that I'm off work after Wednesday for quite a while. I'm really looking forward to that. I'll let you all have the transfer window to yourself.
I was going to say you've not quite timed it right, have you?
No, it would have been Ghosty beat me to these couple of weeks, so
Yeah. No, it is what it is. But how much of a statement signing do you think it is, Liverpool going out and getting one of Europe's most wanted, or world football's most wanted young forwards? Of course, there was a certain other one who signed for Manchester City this summer, but it does feel, whether a reaction to that or a big move to make anyway, that Liverpool, off the back of the season they've had, still then going and paying potentially a club record for a new shiny centre forward to lead the next evolution, I suppose, of what's to come under Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, I mean, I've just written something on this. It's strange, isn't it, the fact that both City and Liverpool have made these signings when they were both independently needed. If you look at the sense that City last season spent all last season being told you need an actual centre forward while scoring about 16 billion goals, but they've actually gone out and done it. And Haaland was always going to go to City, wasn't he? Let's be honest. Wasn't really going anywhere else. His dad played for City and he was brought up a City fan. And City, one of the very few clubs in the world who can afford the massive, package. I actually read something just before that said, well, the release clause was £51 million. The overall package is going to, if you count in agents' fees and signing on bonuses, is £85.5 million. And have we heard that figure somewhere else before? I do believe that we may have done. So just interesting. I would imagine he's getting an absolute ton in wages as well. There was some suggestion before he signed that it was about £300 million overall, the package, if you're counting all of that and his wages. So no club can compete with that. But Liverpool also needed to sign somebody because Mane said he wanted to go. Well, I'm assuming he said he wanted to go. They've never actually come out and said that. But the fact that Bayern Munich they're waiting for a third bid, they need to replace him. And also they've lost Origi, who was the only player that the senior option who's an actual, what you might call a centre forward. So you have two teams one who didn't play with a forward last season, although I think Gabriel Jesus might question that because I think he's actually quite good. Better than Arsenal, let's put it that way. He needs to find himself a proper club, I think, Guy. What do you think?
He's heavily linked to end up.
I know he is. And Liverpool obviously famously don't play with a striker at all with this false 9. But next season you're going to have both of them. They're going to have not quite traditional number 9s because again the thing I've just written for anybody who's got long memories. I'm not sure they're going to be Mick Harford and John Fashanu going around knocking people about and. Even to the days of Alan Shearer, I think those kind of forwards have gone. There's a bit more subtlety to the play of Haaland and to Nunez. So it's almost like there's kind of a change in tact for the pair of them, and they just happen to be the first and second team in the Premier League, and in the top 3 or 4 teams, not so much in Europe but also the world. That shows you Liverpool's standing that they're able to acquire or sign or be attractive enough to a player like Nunez, who I'm not entirely sure he was. Okay, I'll open this up to everybody else. 6 months ago, if you just said Darwin Nunez, would anybody said, "Oh yeah, go and sign him"? Would everybody have been massively interested? I know by then he'd scored against Barcelona and Bayern Munich in the was it Bayern Munich? It was Bayern Munich, wasn't it? Yeah, in the Champions League group stages. But it was only really when he played against Liverpool and people were made aware of him.
Well, he dragged Benfica. I was going to say dragged Benfica even to that stage, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean,
against Ajax, they were overwhelming.
Yes, he scored the header, didn't he? Yes. So by then, people were talking about him then, but I'm not entirely sure he was regarded as being the absolute, most wanted player in Europe. I just wanted to know what everybody else thought about that.
West Ham tried to sign him in January, didn't they? Which I sort of think gives you an indication of sort of where he was. Obviously he didn't get a deal over the line or anything like that, but it sort of gives you an idea of where he was rated really at that point. But then the fact that in the second half of the season, he sort of really kicked on again and the goal tally just kept climbing and climbing. He showed that the first half of the season wasn't a fluke and that, there was more to come from him. I think that sort of is where then Liverpool came into the mix and these bigger clubs as well. So I think you're right about that really. It's sort of, he only really has one huge season behind him as well, doesn't he, coming in at this, which suggests there's an element of risk to the signing, although with it being Liverpool who signed him and they're very good at these things, you think they've got a good idea of what they can get from him.
And even the injuries, you might say, because he had that knee injury, didn't he, last year? But look at Haaland, he's had a succession of injuries, but City are quite happy to take a big punt. Well, I wouldn't say punt because you know how good he is, but in terms of his availability, and that'll be something that's interesting because Mane was almost always available. We know that Salah is. Diaz seems to have played about 1,000 games this year, and so that will be interesting to see. But the thing is, as was kind of hinted at before by Lynchy, he doesn't need to play every game because there's so many other players who can still play there anyway. So he will probably take a little while to bed in.
It's not too dissimilar, is it, in terms of, as Lynchy said there, West Ham put bids in January for him, to the situation that Luis Diaz was in last summer, Everton bidding for him, and then obviously Spurs were sniffing. Liverpool then steal a march. This time round, it was West Ham in for Nunez, then Manchester United with a bit of interest, and Liverpool come along and the masters of opportunism take their chance again. And Tom, really interested to read one of your pieces on the Liverpool Echo website about the role Julian Ward's played in this deal. We know what he did for getting Luis Diaz, but the links he's got to Portugal specifically, even dating back to time when he worked for Manchester City, really coming to the fore in these negotiations.
Yeah, just going back to Nunez as well, I think Barcelona were also interested in him as well during his first season at Benfica. I've just done a piece this morning about what the Benfica manager said sort of during his first season, which was the one behind closed doors 2021. And it was basically just, he got asked about Barcelona being interested in Nunez. And he basically predicted at that point in 2020 that Nunez would go on to break the record fee Benfica received for a player. Obviously, it was João Felix at that time, and he was basically predicting that they were going to lose him at some point for a fee bigger than that. It's not quite as big as that one, but obviously it's happened in the end. Almost 2 years later. And just going back to Julian Ward, obviously taking on the role from Michael Edwards this season, and it's a good promising start. We saw he was involved in the deal with Diaz in January, pushing that forward after Spurs showed interest in him. And the article is just kind of looking at the role he's played in helping Liverpool sign Nunez. And obviously, at the start of his career, he was working with the
Looks as though we've lost Tom there, unfortunately. I thought my internet may have dropped, but
no, I think he's gone for all of us. Before we go any further, by the way, and Tom, just like for anybody watching the YouTube clip, he's kind of just suspended animation there. Oh, he's gone. Anyway, are we calling him Darwin or Nunez? This is the question.
Darwin, if you want to do, it's for headline writers, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm waiting to see the evolution of what people decide.
No, that's just pathetic. That's absolutely pathetic. You would never catch me saying stuff like that.
No, definitely not. But in terms of it then, and you mentioned it before, Doyle, of, I suppose, the cost that Liverpool are paying out for this, it could potentially be club record. But again, it shows how smart they are tactically, even within the negotiations, of the fact that they're bringing him in on a wage that a lot of people will look at it and go, oh, well, Liverpool paying more for him than Man City paying for Erling Haaland. That obviously a lot due to kind of the transfer fee involved. But once wages are taken into consideration, again, it just seems to be another masterstroke in negotiations from the Liverpool transfer team.
Yeah, well, let's be honest. It's not like he's getting paid about £20 a week, is it? He's still getting paid an absolute, quite a lot of money. I know the point you're making.
But he's not going to be. He's not going to be like a.
I know the point you're making, but then he
wage
hasn't.
Structure.
But then it's an interesting one because he probably hasn't got to the point where he's worth that wage, whereas Haaland is. Whereas the reason that City didn't pay more for Haaland is because they knew his release clause. That they can't control what Borussia Dortmund put as their release clause. Whereas, did think he have a release clause? He didn't he? Nunez, it was like really, really high.
Yeah, higher than what they've ended up paying.
They knew that they were never going to get. Benfica knew they were never going to get any takers there. So, and also quite clearly, the players said, "I quite fancy leaving. I want to go to Liverpool." And if you are a team like Benfica, who are a leading club in Europe, there are very few that you'd be happy to. Well, you never have to sell to anybody, but there's very few that you accept that possibly you're going to lose a player to. And Liverpool are now of that standing that. Possibly 5 or 6 years ago, even they just weren't. They weren't even close to it. Look what happened when they got beat in the Europa League final. And funny enough, they're kind of in the Man United are in that situation now, aren't they? Where they might struggle a little bit to get players in because they're not in the Champions League, whereas Liverpool can offer that. And they've been 3 of the last 5 finals, which, given the fact United were led to believe were one of the clubs that were also in for him, it's a significant point. But yeah, I don't think we should read too much into the whole wages thing. I just think Liverpool have just done really well to be able to thrash out a deal with Benfica because wages were never really going to be the issue. It was going to be how much they wanted to pay for the player himself.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but equally, when you then tie in the fact that it's going to be a 6-year deal, he's probably not going to be looking at renewing a contract for a good 3 or 4 seasons.
I think it's going to be a little bit like if he does well for the first year, 18 months, he'll get offered a renewed deal. That's what will happen.
But equally then, in terms of how Liverpool seem to run things a lot of the time with the contracts, is a player comes in, does well, gets one renewal that is then a very long-term deal, by which point takes them probably past the age of 30. And then Liverpool again look to negotiate it a lot closer to the time, as maybe happened with Gini Wijnaldum and everyone saying, give him a big contract and effectively back pay him for how brilliant he's been. But it just shows... I just think it shows savviness. I don't know what you think, Dave, on kind of how Liverpool are able to just continually have their wage bill where it is, yet fight alongside Man City season in, season out.
This is a big test of it, though, isn't it? I suppose because you're losing one of that initial front 3 who've been such a big part of what they've achieved up to this point. And replacing him with someone who is basically Omani. When Sadio Mane comes in, he's that player who has shown real promise, at a high level. But there's got to be a lot more to come from him if he's going to keep Liverpool where they are. So I suppose this is the major test of the theory. Really, is can you keep your wage bill at that point and still be consistently that team that challenges for top honours? And I think you sort of need Nunez to really hit the ground running for that to be the case. It's going to be sort of interesting to see how that plays out. Really.
Is this, Doyle, do you think the completion of maybe the next rung of Liverpool's front 3? I mean, of course, there's wondering what's going to happen with Mohamed Salah and his new contract, but now there's been Jota, Luis Diaz, and now Darwin Nunez all arriving at Liverpool. I suppose the ball's in Mohamed Salah's court, whether he wants to commit to being part of this next project.
Yeah, it's interesting. Salah said it's not just about money with him, but it'll be interesting to see what else it's going to take for him to actually sign his contract. And Liverpool can't be accused of lacking ambition when they've just potentially broken the club transfer record to sign a player who is going to help the forward line and you'd think help him. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's another signing along the way in terms of you look at in fact, no, actually, I would be surprised. It's completely changed my mind on that one. But I think it's because Carvalho's coming in and we're led to believe that he's going to be more of an option up front for the season coming. So you'd think that he could be somebody who could go off on the wing or cover for Salah. But Liverpool, as you said before, they've always been quite opportunist. They're losing possibly 3 forwards this summer in Minamino. We know Origi's gone on Mane. They're bringing in one massive fee and big name in Nunez or Darwin, depending on what you want to call him. And So there possibly could be scope for another one. But then you look at the likes of Cade Gordon. He's obviously already played in a League Cup semi-final.
I was just going to say, it seems
Cavalli as well, and you got Harvey Elliott as well.
Yeah.
Who are all different types of players. This could give them more of an opportunity to play in certain games, especially with. And while I don't agree with it, you've got the 5 subs coming in for all the competitions now. So there is more scope for resting players, certainly during the courses of games, and it'll give players such as these a chance to actually get some minutes. So maybe they don't really need another forward at the moment. Obviously, if Salah goes, then they're going to have to replace him.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Looks as though Lynchy's dropped out, but Tom, you're back with us. Tom, good to have you.
Sorry about that.
It's not a problem, but we were talking before about Julian Ward. We've moved on kind of talking about how Liverpool, the real negotiations of how they've managed to do this. And I suppose now on the front three, when you really do look at it for Liverpool, there is a clear idea of where they are in the position going forward. And I suppose final piece of the jigsaw, many people might say it's Nunez, it's whether Salah does commit to a new contract.
Yeah, I know everyone's been saying as well about Nunez coming in to replace Mane, but a lot of people have also made the point of Liverpool technically replaced him in January with signing Diaz. So I guess Nunez is just the next stage of Liverpool's attack, really going forwards for the long term. And like you said, it's just a case of whether Salah sticks around to be part of that, or chooses to go on to seek a new challenge somewhere else. So, I mean, even if Salah does go, just given what Liverpool have been doing in the transfer market, being able to replace people like Mane, who looks to be leaving the club, and being so efficient with the business and how they go about it, even if Salah does go, you sort of, have a belief that they would find a suitable replacement for him in the long term, who would be able to fit in with how Liverpool play, and sort of that, how Liverpool's attack play really, and how it's designed to function. So, yeah, even if Salah does go, I think they still back themselves to find a sort of a go-to replacement for him, really.
Doyley, you're away, as you've let us know already, from Wednesday onwards for a bit of time. Is there a chance Liverpool try and get another deal in before your holidays come around? Calvin Ramsey, of course, from Aberdeen, is believed to be on the radar.
They best not. I'd be very disappointed if they did that. I don't know. Ramsey, there's not really much movement on that at the moment. In terms of other people coming in, don't know. I think it's going to largely depend on which people leave now, and that leaves open. Do they need another midfielder? Well, we've already spoken at length on many podcasts about what the long-term plan is there. So bringing in a midfielder is obviously a long-term plan, not necessarily this summer. Although they were obviously interested in the lad from Monaco, whose name I can never pronounce.
Tchouameni.
Him as well. Yeah.
Yep.
He's obviously. Has he actually been unveiled by Rome? He has now, hasn't he? He has been unveiled by Rome.
I think over the weekend, yeah.
Yeah, over the weekend, yeah. So again, we said that Liverpool had been shown an interest, but were very much aware that the player was most likely going to go to Real Madrid. So they knew that from a while out. So yeah, they are looking around. I mean, the one name that keeps on coming around is Jude Bellingham, which now somebody's going to quote tweet me on some fan website talking about him. But it's no big secret that Liverpool are interested in him and would quite like to sign him at some point, because why wouldn't you? He's actually quite good at football. But that, at the moment at least, if they're going for proper interest on that, would appear more likely next year, not least because they've just spent or about to spend an awful lot of money on one player. But we all know that Liverpool are opportunists in the transfer market, as you've said, Guy, and we've mentioned that quite a few years now. And if the situation comes whereby they know they can get him, they might look to try and venture down that path. Notice how carefully I'm picking my words here.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see where they go with it. And Lynchy, I hope you're back with us. The internet's not been kind to us today. If only there was a place we could all gather with microphones and record.
It'll never catch on, Guy. Come on. No, we know it's never going to happen. Never going to happen.
No, not sure it will. But Lynchy, in terms of how quickly they've moved for Darwin Nunez, of course, back in pre-season 3 weeks today, that they're going to have him around. And as Doyle says now, I'm sure the focus will shift to selling players before maybe returning for that midfielder, if it's to be, that the opportunity presents itself this summer to bring one in.
Yeah, I think getting some people off the wage bill is sort of the priority. I think there's no real rush in terms of that, just because you're at the mercy, aren't you, of the buying clubs and what they're willing to go to, and whether they want to get their business done early, if they think that they can push things a little later and get themselves a bargain late in the window. That sort of becomes a factor for Liverpool. So I don't think they're going to be massively reactive. I agree with Doyle, really. I think sometimes the thing about the midfield being a priority for 2023, it can feel a little bit like a negotiating position from Liverpool, but I don't really get the vibe that is exactly what's going on here. I think they genuinely will go into this season with the current midfield options and maybe look to strengthen next summer, unless something crazy happened and it emerged that Dortmund really desperately needed the money, but I don't think they're in that position. So I think Liverpool will sort of kick that into the long grass till 2023. And as you say, the priority now otherwise is to sort of move some players on. And there's quite a bit of interest in some of those fringe players. I think Minamino has pretty much got his pick of clubs. So yeah, it shouldn't be too difficult to move them on, and unless, as I say, clubs maybe want to wait till later in the window to see if they can pick anyone up for cheap.
And I suppose, Tom, the first one of those names who could well be getting off this summer is Sadio Mane. Bayern Munich expected to come back in this week with another offer.
Yeah, it's sort of being reported about Bayern, a third bid being considered at the moment. It'd be interesting to see, what the offer is if they do come in with that, because obviously they've seen the first two turned down by Liverpool, and the first one being immediately rejected, and then the second one including the questionable clauses to do with the Champions Leagues and Ballon d'Or. So I was saying the other day, it'll be interesting to see, what kind of offer they do make, because they won't want to, run the risk of sort of aggravating Liverpool too much. They've obviously found the second offer particularly insulting, just given the clauses that are attached to it. So you'd imagine they would go sort of approach with a figure that's closer to what Liverpool are looking for, which is around the 42 million pound mark. And, there may be a case of Liverpool having to kind of meet them in the middle. But you'd imagine it's a deal that would get done, because it seems like, it's one on both sides that they both want it to happen. Sadio Mane, obviously, and Bayern Munich want the transfer. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. But it's kind of pointing towards Bayern getting a deal done.
And just sticking with you, Tom, as well, what's the latest on that Phillips? Because I know yesterday you were reporting that maybe, not quite as cut and dry, that he will be off for a permanent exit.
Yeah, obviously Liverpool's plan was to initially sell Phillips this summer. 15 million was the price tag placed on Phillips. But Liverpool are now considering a possible loan for him this summer. And if that is to happen, it's suggested that Bournemouth will be the club that he goes back to. Obviously, he spent the second half of last season with Bournemouth and helped them get back to the Premier League. And obviously enjoyed his time on loan there. And it's sort of pointing towards Phillips returning to Bournemouth if he is to go out on loan again. It's not confirmed at this stage. That's definitely going to happen. But there's a chance that Liverpool will consider that as an option. And it's just a case of whether Bournemouth come in for him again. And, they may well do, given how well he sort of slotted into their defence next season. And as they prepare for return to the Premier League, he could be a good option for them.
I'm intrigued by that one, because I think I remember I've read somewhere that someone said he needs a season to prove himself in the Premier League. It's like, hang on, you just played for Liverpool when they had, hardly any centre backs, and he helped them into the Champions League. So I don't see why that should be a problem.
Equally, the other two seasons he's had away from Liverpool, with Stuttgart and now with Bournemouth, he's won promotion in both of them.
Yeah, exactly. So he's obviously fairly decent. We know that for a fact. I mean, I just wonder whether or not it may be a case of other teams being creative, and maybe there'll be. This is me just guessing now, before anybody tries to quote me again on this. This is me guessing. Basically saying that Liverpool could say, right, you can take him on loan with an obligation to buy for 15 million, and that obligation can only possibly be triggered if they stay in the Premier League, because then they know they'll have the money. So that might be something that they're looking at. But that's just me guessing. I do think there's going to be a lot of that. I think that the way the club finances are, because a lot of the clubs are still hit from that, 12, 14 months without crowds, and I think they're still trying to get back up to positions that they were in beforehand. And while I remember we spoke 2 years ago about whether it was going to impact the transfer market, it didn't seem to initially, but I do think in terms of the way deals are structured, and you're going to get a lot more loan moves and swaps and stuff like that. You're seeing a lot more free transfers, or it just seems to be. Look at Chelsea. I know there's a slightly different situation where some of the players didn't know what was going to be happening because of what happened with Abramovich and having to sell the club. But I think I've seen like 3 or 4 of most of the defence is leaving on a free transfer, aren't they? And that just wouldn't have happened a couple of years ago. So I think possibly that's kind of switched more towards the player in terms of their power, which of course brings us all the way back to Salah and brings us back to Mane, where perhaps clubs have been not forced into situations, but thinking, well, we do actually need to do something here. And it just happens to be that Liverpool have a lot of players who are out of contract or entering the last 12 months of their contracts. And one of them is Matip. And that goes back to Nat Phillips and whether Liverpool are going to go, well, we probably might not give Joe Matip a new contract, see what Nat Phillips is like, whether he could become in line to be an option to centre back. But then if Nat Phillips plays all week, all month, all season even at Bournemouth, why would he want to come back to Liverpool and be the 4th choice centre back? Yeah, intriguing, isn't it, guy? It's intriguing.
No, it is. But so Matip's contract, does it run to next season or the year after? 24,
No, it's next season, isn't it? I think.
It's 2024, wasn't it?
It's 24. He signed a new 5-year deal in 2019.
Of course, yeah. No, everything I just said about Matip, just ignore that.
No, but even though it was wrong, I've
already switched off, haven't I? Let's face it.
No, it makes sense in terms of if Phillips goes out on a loan for the next season, that's then where Matip has 12 months left on a contract.
Yes.
Where it's again either go out on another 1-year loan or even be part of the squad and start taking on some first team minutes before Matip potentially leaves. But we'll have to wait and see how it does play out. We're going to wrap up there here on this latest Blood Red podcast. We have recently launched an email address, bloodred@reachplc.com. So if you want to get in touch with us with any correspondence you want, and we will try to make that a regular feature of the podcast. If you're an internet provider, please do reach out to Lynchy and to Tom Cavilla as we wrap up though. Doyley ready to put his holiday request in and his out-of-office email on. But from the rest of us, we will be back on Friday. Myself, Guy Clarke, David Lynch, Tom Cavilla and Ian Doyle. Thanks for your time and your company. It's bye for now.